You have the floor. Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. Go ahead, please. I will be brief because I would like to take a few minutes at the end of my presentation to explain to the members of the Standing Committee of Agriculture how agri-stability works. We've talked an awful lot during the minister's presentation of this program. There are diverging opinions with regard to it, and I believe that there's general misunderstanding of the way this program functions. So we'll attempt an exercise with you, and we'll try to explain to you how it works. First of all, agriculture in Canada is $112 billion of income, $60 billion in exports, an awful lot of farm income. It's one of the most important economic sectors for our regions. It's a sector that has been suffering with the COVID-19 crisis. There have been closures of slaughterhouses and processing plants. You've just heard about the consequences. A lot of things have been done to help. There's been a loss of market, shortages of labor. There have been net losses for producers because of these various hardships. We're starting to be able to tally up the losses. For poultry alone, nationally, the losses are of about $115 million. For beef, we'll come back to this later, but the Canadian Cattlemen's Association mentioned $500 million nationwide losses. In Quebec, for grains, there have been tremendous losses. Just for corn and soybean, the losses Canada-wide would be of $86 million. We know that with regard to processing in slaughterhouses, the losses were very serious, and there are extra expenses due to the safety measures that have to be taken to protect employees. Just in Quebec, we're talking about more than $100 million for the processing sector in losses. So the assistance offered last year, well, the measures are grossly below our expectations. But I must say that with regard to the program for foreign workers to support these employees when they arrive in Canada, there were wonderful efforts made, and I wish to underscore this. For the rest, the other programs, it's insufficient. What's been offered when we compare our situation to what's been provided in the U.S., we're talking about $19 billion in the U.S. It's 10 to 12 times more than what was announced last week here in Canada. Our future remains very uncertain. There are very volatile markets. It's difficult to predict anything. When we look at the programs that should help us face this situation, Agri-stability, for example, it's a program that isn't working properly, and this is why only 31% of producers in Canada have registered for this program. Producers are not stupid people. If the program worked, they would be on board with it. So at the outset, if producers don't register for a program, it's not because they don't understand it. It's because the program doesn't work properly. With regard to agri-investment, I find difficult to hear the minister say you should use the $2.2 billion from agri-investment that you have in your accounts. These monies aren't necessarily held in the producer accounts today, the producers who are in difficulty at present. The Quebec hog producers have $40 million in their agri-investment accounts for a production value of $1.4 billion in Quebec for hogs. So this equation using agri-investment, because you've got $2.2 billion, well, it doesn't apply directly. It's as if you ask people before applying for employment insurance, make sure that you clean out all your bank accounts. It's as if you told students those who have access to the program are those who don't have any money in their bank account. And we're talking about assistance to be provided to them. It just doesn't hold. Out of the $1.6 billion theoretically available for the producers that Ms. Bibeau has asked us to use last year, from the $1.6 billion, more than $1.1 billion was paid out for crop insurance in Canada. So this has nothing to do with agri-investment nor with agri-stability. So obviously what we're asking is that there be emergency funding to respond to the needs of the various sectors, like the meat sector that is facing specific challenges today, and especially to improve the risk management programs, because the impact of the crisis is not just immediate. This will last throughout the year and most probably go into the following year. So if our risk management programs in Canada are not sufficient, producers will experience difficulties today, but even greater difficulties in the coming years. And now I would ask you to look at the table. I don't know if you had the opportunity to look at this table entitled Agri-stability. It's in French only. I'll go through a little exercise with you, and Isabelle is here to help me if need be. We took the example of an average farm in Quebec with revenues of $250,000 per year, historical eligible expenses of $100,000 a year, to see that in the present program, the eligible expenses are limited and family labor isn't included, isn't eligible for the historic expenses. So small family businesses are more severely penalized. The historical reference management reference is $150,000, but this year, because of COVID, this margin, reference margin, will be $70,000, the reference margin. So that's a business that has lost $80,000 this year out of gross income of $250,000. So it's enormous. This business this year, since the reference margin is of $100,000, so we're compensating 70% of it as of 70% of 70,000, and this reference margin is 70,000. Agri-stability for this business will provide zero monies. So even if the business says, I want to have access to 75% of what agri-stability would give me, there'll be nothing, nil, zip, to help this business. But this business will have lost $80,000 out of reference level of 150,000, the reference margin. So it's more than half. What we're proposing for agri-stability is to improve some criteria. For example, to no longer limit the historical margin. In the second column, the historical margin isn't limited to 100,000. It's 150,000. 70% of 150,000 gives me 105,000. So it's more. It's 35% more than my reference level of 70,000. Multiplied by 70%, that business would get $24,500. And we see that if we increase the margin reference to 85%, well, that farm would get $40,250. The third column is what the program was before the 2013 cuts. So in 2013, when we were saying that the program was working properly, a business with a drop of $80,000 in the margin would have been compensated upwards of 50%, what Mr. Blois was saying earlier. So there would be 50% of debt coverage, and we'd, for that purpose, have to go back to the structure of the program as it existed in 2013. We'll be providing you with perhaps a more detailed table. All this to say to all of you that no matter your party, the party you represent, agri-stability is not working. And this is why producers aren't coming on board, aren't registering for it. And agri-stability is even less functional for small farms because you don't cover in the eligible expenditures the withdrawal of payment to the family unit working on the farm. So I'm asking all of you, without any partisanship whatsoever, to work on improving this program if you really, truly want to support Canadian farming. It is essential. Thank you.